chapter 6, starting with verse 16. See if I can keep up with my place. You know, this scripture refers to Jesus walking on water. Now, I may have been a crazy kid when I was younger. I don't think you believe that, do you? My brother had a boat, and he parked it out at the lake about probably 6-7 feet off the dock, and he anchored it there. Well, this particular day, he wanted me to go out and get the anchor and pull the boat into the dock. That was my job. The lake was just flat, not a breeze blowing. So I looked out there, and I could see that boat right there. And I said to myself, you know, I can run over there and get that anchor without falling in that water. It's only that far. So I got back about 20 feet and ran hard as I could, barefooted. And I hit the water, and I thought, boy, I'm light. Step, 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 step. I got about 5 steps and sunk. Of course, the story I told my brother was I ran 10 or 20 feet out there when I really only ran about 5. But you know, it seemed like such a great thing to do. And you know what? I was having fun running on water. Jesus does the same thing, except he doesn't sink. Let's look at our scripture today. Verse 16 starts off, when evening came, the disciple went down to the lake, and they got into their boat and set sail across the lake for Capernaum. Now, it was just dark, and Jesus had not joined them yet. A strong wind was blowing, and the water grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they looked up and saw Jesus approaching the boat. He was walking on water. They were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were headed. The next day, the crowd had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake, realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples. But they had gone away alone. Then some of the boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the boat had been where they had eaten bread after the Lord had taken and gave thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into their boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. While Jesus leaves the mountain in Upper Galilee, his disciples were to set sail and head for the lake's northeastern shore. After rowing 3 or 4 miles, a storm catches up in the middle of the lake with them. Now note from above in the scripture that the east-west winds were common in the sea. Fishermen watched out for them carefully before they got in their boats. They feared the rough waters, however, was surprised wasn't the wind. The surprise was Jesus, and it brought terror to them. There he was, walking to them on water. Now, I don't know about you, but that might have been a surprise to me too. And I could see them being fearful. First of all, they were dealing with a boat in the water, thrashing, going back and forth. The nausea of the water. The fear wasn't the rough water, like I said. It was the terror of seeing Jesus walking on it. In verse 19 it said, again, we have another idea of the Old Testament comparison. A water miracle happens. It reminds us of a moment when Moses led Israel through the water in Exodus 13 through 15. Not even one footprint showed up as Moses and the Israelites crossed the sea. There wasn't even a footprint that showed up. So what kind of miracle you can expect if he parted the water, that there'd be some mud. You would expect some footprints. Psalm 77 describes this moment. Not the moment of Moses, but the moment of the disciples in the water. It says, starting in verse 16 of 77, Psalm 77, the water you saw, O God, the water you saw enriched. The very depths were convulsive. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters. Through your footprints, even though your footprints were not seen, you led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. So here is Moses doing somewhat the same kind of miracle of the sea that we see Jesus. When Jesus arrives at the boat, he identifies himself with a term that was used in the Old Testament. He invoked an image of the Exodus story when he said, "It is I." As in 4:25 of John. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. This may be a mere form of self-identification that he used at this time. but it was implied more than just identifying himself. The verb that he used was that of the same one, a divine name that Moses heard on Mount Sinai. In Exodus 3:14, he says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am who has been sent me to you. In other words, God sent me to you. Jesus is implying the same thing. God sent me. Even Jesus called out to fear the echoes of Moses in his response to the mountain. He had learned God's name and saw the burning bush. As this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God in Exodus 3:5. Jesus approached, and even though he was not now providing an awesome and overwhelming presentation of his power, they needed to know that they didn't need to fear him. So what does Jesus say? While Mark says that Jesus called the storm when he entered the boat, he calmed the storm, it said. Then he climbed into the boat, it says, with them. And with that, the wind died down. They were completely amazed. But what did John say in chapter 6, verse 21? He almost implied that they barely were able to get him into the boat while they reached their destination. But there's a big difference. Yes, the waters were still turbulent. It didn't say that Jesus calmed the waters, that he climbed into the boat. And guess what? They arrived immediately at their destination. Now, how many disciples were in the boat? Each disciple arrived at his destination out of that one boat that Jesus was in. It doesn't say where Jesus wound up or where they wound up, but they wound up at their destination. But we do know that they barely could get him into the boat. Think of what Psalms 107 may have provided a background for this image. The psalm describes the terror that the mariners had of the storms and the water. Listen to what it says in 107, Psalms 107, starting in 25. This is a description of their terror. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest that lifted the waves. They mounted to the heavens and went down into the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunken men. They were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm with a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad that it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired heaven, to their destination. Again, Jesus is fulfilling the role of God. What is he doing? He's feeding, protecting, rescuing, guiding his followers despite their natural calamities of their surroundings. Even though they had fear, Jesus took care of them. Questions surfaced the next day when the crowd discovered that although Jesus had